with a special live event focusing on the state of hazing in America. We've gathered students, parents, and experts right here on our plaza for what we hope will be a very powerful and timely conversation.
So with us right now, the co-sponsors of an anti-hazing bill known as the REACH Act, Representatives Patrick Meehan and Marcia Fudge. We're also joined by Jim and Evelyn Piazza. Their son, Tim, died following a night of alleged fraternity hazing at Penn State University. Tom Klein is their attorney. Good morning to all of you.
Morning.
Thank you so much.
Morning.
Mr. and Mrs. Piazza, we learned that the issue of hazing is not going away. There was an incident of alleged hazing at LSU just last week. We know what happened with your son, Tim. Was this a subject that you talked about openly and often in your home before your son went off to college?
Not really. We really didn't think very much of either of our boys joining a fraternity or hazing or anything like that. It kind of came to us a little bit later on that Tim was interested in joining a fraternity, and frankly, that thought really was not a significant thought of
When you heard that he was interested in joining a fraternity, did hazing come to your mind even at that point?
It did, but when I read the tenets of this fraternity, I felt better because it was a non-hazing, non-alcohol fraternity. So I thought, okay, we're good.
Unfortunately, we know what the awful things that transpired with your son. It's really unspeakable. What does it mean to you to be here today and what we're about to sit down and do and have this conversation? I think it's important to ground it in what you are hoping to accomplish here.
Yeah, well, this is important because the legislation is about holding the schools accountable. The schools need to hold the students accountable. And by the way, the court systems need to hold the students accountable as well. I think the only way we're going to get change is if we have some real accountability and hopefully deterrence from doing this in the future.
One of the things that the REACH Act is intended to do is actually define what hazing is. So let's start there. How do you do that?
Substantial risk of injury. That's where you really start, and knowing, I mean, these are the elements, so to speak, but it suggests that you understand that there's some risk associated with certain activities. And we're not talking about the kind of lighthearted things that, you know, that aren't really a threat.
Shaving your head, painting the school logo on your face, running across the campus naked, that's not what you're trying to do away with.
Well, but it really is to some degree. What we're talking about is humiliation, degradation. We're talking about things that might be reckless behavior, not always intentional, but certainly intentional, reckless, or without regard to a person's safety or mental health. So it could in fact be something like that. We're talking about excessive use of alcohol. We're talking about sex acts, which are very common in these kinds of things. But let me also say, it's not confined to sororities and fraternities. Also, people in marching bands, choirs, sports activities. It is rampant on college campuses, and it has to stop.
And let's be clear about what this legislation does, because it doesn't outlaw hazing. It doesn't really seek to govern these fraternities and sororities. It simply states that the universities should start reporting incidents of hazing. And it does raise a question, Congressman, I'll put it to you. Are the universities kind of turning a blind eye? I'd like to hear the Piazzas on that as well.
Look, exposure, education, accountability, this pulls everybody into the dialogue, and the more than 50% of the students that are subjected to hazing during the course of the year, and as Marcia said, a broad spectrum of activities, not just fraternities and sororities, but it makes the school a partner, first in reporting any kind of incidents of hazing, and then educating their student body prior to a school year about what it means to haze and the fact that you're going to be accountability.
Yeah, that bill tells universities and colleges that they have to report any hazing incidents as part of their annual crime report. So that makes it more significant for the university.
Yeah, correct. We're building on the Clery Act that already reports acts of, you know, violence or other kinds of criminal activity on the campus.
Let's take this to the more personal level for a second. I didn't get to meet Tim, but you've told me a lot about him when we sat down and talked. He was smart, he was confident, he was well liked. And as a parent now, I say, okay, so I think I've got kids who are all of those things. But how can I be sure that they're going to get to college and they're going to try to join an organization and they're going to be willing to stand up and say, no, I don't want to join your organization badly enough to have you put me through what you're trying to put me through. How would you answer that question?
Well, young kids are impressionable, and sometimes they feel peer pressure. We're trying to do things that will make a difference. We're trying to do things that will put an end to it. For example, we're working with the state of Pennsylvania to try to introduce new laws which make the hazing penalty stiffer, not only for the individuals that do it, but also for the universities and other organizations that turn a blind eye to it.
Jim and Ellen, do you think there's a flip side to this too that we haven't really talked about? I mean, we hear about a hazing victim. What about the hazing perpetrators? And what conversations do you think parents need to be having with their children to say, if you see something that is wrong, you need to be ready to stand up and stop it in that moment, because as we know, there were people in a position to help your son.
Right. I think as a parent, you need to have that conversation with your child to say, it's unacceptable. Under no circumstance is hazing acceptable, and to let them know all of the potential risks that come along with it, in addition to morally hurting somebody and potentially them dying.
And if someone stands up and ostracizes you for standing up against this, well then you don't need them in your life. Let's go to Hoda, who is standing by with people in our crowd. Hoda?
Hi guys, I'm going to start here with Gentry McCreary. He's an expert in hazing prevention, and it does make you wonder, Gentry, in this day and age, why on earth does hazing exist at these colleges, and why is it that kids who are smart kids with like a 3.5 GPA and all this stuff end up signing up for that?
Well, there's research that would suggest that we have evolved to haze, that literally as humans going through the last several thousand years, that we look for opportunities to keep newcomers from coming into our groups and exploiting the status of our groups. And I think that's why you see hazing so much worse in fraternities and varsity athletes and other organizations. There's a lot of status associated with being in those groups, and so those groups don't want to just give that status away. They want people to earn it, and people are willing to subject themselves to those degrading tasks because they want to be part of those groups.
You can't believe with the deaths and things that we've been seeing that this still exists.
Absolutely, and there's different motivations. I think that's important to understand. Some groups haze because they have an altruistic motive. They want to bring groups together, they want to build unity or solidarity, but oftentimes what we see is just the abuse of power. We see people who have something, I know I can make you do anything in order to get it, I can make you drink alcohol until you pass out, and they abuse that power, and that's really what we need to curb, is deal with that power differential that's inherent, particularly in the fraternity pledging process.
Thanks, Gentry. Guys?
Yeah, there's something else, you get together in these groups, whether it's a marching band or an athletic organization or Greek life, and sometimes the existing members will say to pledges, well, I did this, and that's how I'm a part of this group. Why won't you do it? The pressure they exert on these young minds is substantial.
Yeah, as I said, young people are impressionable, and I have no doubt there are people that probably don't want to do it but feel the pressure that they have to. That's what we need to put an end to. We need to put an end to all of this. We need to break that trend.
And it's a cycle of abuse.
Go ahead.
Congressman?
There are a lot of good things that come from being involved in these organizations as well. And so people also look at, how do I benefit by being a part of this? How am I elevated on my campus, as he was talking about? How do I build a network of people who can help me as I go further in my career or in my education? So there are some advantages as well. So people, I think, look at that and then they weigh. Is it so bad? But nobody should send their kid to school and may not come home. And so that's why we have to do something about this.
Tom, I mean, there's obviously a criminal aspect to this. In some cases, you represent the Piazzas. There's a criminal case unfolding there. Writ largely, do you think enough is being done to prosecute and to aggressively pursue incidents of hazing that cross into that line?
If there is not an aggressive posture towards the prosecution of what is a crime in most states, then there will not be deterrence. That's part of what we see and what we recognize. There's a culture of abuse and there's a culture of recidivism that we have here, and someone has to try to break it. That's what universities are grappling with, and that's what the Piazzas are grappling with as well.
Hoda?
Hey guys, I've got Stuart Seldowitz. You want to stand up, sir? And he's got triplets, by the way, 3 kids all getting ready to go to college, and you guys have discussed Greek life. You have a question for the Piazzas.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are there warning signs that either parents or students can pick up on before initiation about individual fraternities that would indicate that maybe there's something dangerous involved in their initiation?
We certainly had no warning signs. As my wife said, she looked up this fraternity. It seemed to be a model fraternity, but what was going on inside its doors was something completely different. I think the message to the children is, if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't look right, get out.
You know, I also think it's very important. You ask a very good question, because we have rituals, but it shouldn't be on the student who's looking to try to potentially join something to figure out what it might be about. These organizations have a responsibility to revisit what these rituals are about and make sure ahead of time that they're removing the kinds of things which create a substantial risk of harm or degradation and other kinds of things. So I think this sends a signal as much to the fraternity councils and to the universities to revisit the things that people have been doing to make sure that they're not harmful.
Thanks.
There's another aspect of this, and Kate Snow touched on this in her piece earlier in the show. She said sometimes at universities and colleges, when they outlaw these things, they're driven underground. And at that point, you get a practice that gets even more dangerous because it's so far from the eyes of authorities that it goes further. How do you deal with that?
I think there are a couple of things. One, of course, the university has to have policies in place that are so strict that people know that if I get caught doing this, I could be expelled, I could be prosecuted. And I think that also the organizations, I'm a part of a sorority, we make sure that our policies are so clear. We make them sign saying, I will not be hazed. We make our membership saying, I will not haze, so that we have the ability to hold them accountable for whatever they do and set it and make an example of them when they do it. And I think we have to work together to make sure that everybody is on the same page.
And there's a universal principle here, which is universities must own this problem. Universities cannot walk away from it.
I'm going to go to Hoda because I know you've got another question.
Hey, we have Austin Schlesinger hand. You can go ahead and stand up. He's a sophomore at Rutgers. He's a member of a fraternity, and he has a question for the congressman and congresswoman.
So I pledged a fraternity last semester, and I was fortunate enough to have an awesome experience. But for a lot of my friends, they didn't have the same experience as I did. And that being said, I'm really happy that we're taking a step in the right direction to address the hazing epidemic. My question is with regard to the REACH Act. I understand that the REACH Act will mandate universities to document hazing as a part of their annual crime report. But how do you plan to document and account for all the hazing that's not reported?
Good question.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of people that go to college think that hazing is normal. And so they don't even know that they've been hazed. That is why the education component of this bill is going to make sure that when they go to a college campus, that college is going to tell them what hazing is, instruct them how to report it, where to report it, and what their expectations should be after they report it. I think if people believe something will happen, they will report it. Most people think, nothing's going to happen if I report it, and I don't even know who to report it to, and so they don't. But I think if people understand how serious this is, and that they can get some real redress, they will report it.
And we have a model with the Clery Act that's already demonstrated that it's working, particularly with issues of violence, sexual violence on campuses. So there's a pattern that with education and reporting that's already proven to work on college campuses.
Jim and Evelyn, just in the 35, 40 seconds we have left, leave people watching with one piece of advice. The parents at home who've just sent their kids off to college or are about to in the coming years.
Talk to your kids. Be open and honest, and convince them that they can tell you anything, so that they can tell you if they're in a bad situation.
Just make sure they understand what happened to Tim and this most recent situation. They need to know about it.
It could happen to them.
really appreciate you coming and continuing to share your story and make a difference with your story. And thanks for the act that the bill you're proposing. We think it'll make a huge difference as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We want to keep this conversation going online. We've got a lot more coming up tonight on NBC Nightly News as well, so we hope you get involved.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.